It's now Monday the 18th of January 2010, and as you can see I'm still in hospital. That's because I'm still neutropenic, but only just. The signs that I thought yesterday that my neutrophils were finally on their way up and coming out of the marrow, that being that my sore throat was going and that my cannula holes were starting to heal normally rather than just sitting there as holes in my arm, were correct. According to my doctor, and blood tests this morning have shown that my neutrophil levels are now up to 400. That's 400 cells per microliter of blood, which is a cubic millimetre. The kind of bottom level for being neutropenic is 500, so I've still got a way before I'm out of the neutropenic category, as it were, and still a long way from being normal or being able to be released from this room. I think they're looking at about 1,000 cells before I can leave the room, and most normal humans have between 1,500 and 2,000 cells per microliter, so I've still got a way to go, but 400 is a good number. My doctors are pleased with how the growth has been over the weekend, given that I had none on Friday, and at least it also shows that my body can produce them, that they haven't got to kind of step in and start worrying about the fact that my body's unable to produce them or is producing them far too slowly. So hopefully over the next few days I'll be able to push through numbers that get me out of being neutropenic and get up to the 1,000 or so required to get me out of this room and get me back into some semblance of normal life. Okay, it's the 19th of January 2010. I'm still in hospital, which is making this quite a long and dull blog, which doesn't appear to have a great deal of change. Yesterday my neutrophil count was at 400 or 0.4 depending on the scale that you measure it at, and I've just got my blood test result from this morning and they're now at 0.8 or 800 per microliter, which is really good news. I haven't spoken to my doctor since this morning's test was taken, so I don't know how they view it. I see it as pretty positive, but there are other markers obviously in a blood test that they're looking at. There are markers to show signs of infection and that kind of thing, so they may well be looking for those to go down as well as my neutrophil count to go up. Today's been a very long day. I found it very tough. I think it's hard to convey in the video just what an odd feeling of isolation from the world being in an isolation room can cause. I feel a real sense of detachment. I've got lots of things to do in here. I've got magazines to read, I've got the internet that I can surf, I've got books to read, I've got DVDs to read, but it gets to a point where having just been in the same room all the time just begins to genuinely drive you nuts. And I think I'm reaching that point now. There's a kind of real sense of lack of attachment to the outside world, so I'm not really interested in newspapers at the moment or watching the news or anything, because it just doesn't seem to have any relevance to me being in this room. Obviously psychologically I'm hoping this will be a temporary thing, and once I'm out I'll kind of realign my mind, as it were. But I think one of the biggest things in going through all this treatment is dealing with this sustained period of isolation and this sustained period of being in the same place for so long. People come and go, that's great. I get visitors, but it's no substitute for not being in this room. And that's at the moment the toughest thing to get through and the thing that's bringing me down the most, really. So I'm hoping that when my doctor sees me tomorrow and we discuss this blood count, and hopefully tomorrow's blood count will be even higher, that I'm hoping that I'm just days away from getting out of this room. It's now the 20th of January 2010 and things are finally starting to look up. My neutrophil levels are now at 1,700. Which is just under the normal level for a normal person. So as a result, I get to go home tomorrow. I'm just being kept in overnight for observations, but I've got no more IV antibiotics, so my cannula or peripheral line has been taken out, which is a great relief, which means I can now wash with both hands, and just be a bit more normal. I'm still stuck in this room, although I'm not neutropenic, but I've only got a night to spend here and there's not really much to see out. And I'd rather be here than on a ward with lots of other people for my last night. Tomorrow morning, the doctors will come around, give me my final injection of a growth hormone, which has been helping get the neutrophils up and out quicker than we'd ordinarily expect them to be. My drugs form will be filled out, and then the pharmacy at some point will give me my drugs, and then once that's happened I can then go. I'm on a 6-month course now of antibiotics, which is pretty standard after this form of chemotherapy. Once I've got all those drugs and have figured out what they are, I'll need to draw up a timetable to make sure that I don't forget to take them. But after having a pretty poor start to the morning, I was feeling really down. I'm very depressed about yet another day in this room. Things have ended great, and at least now there's light at the end of the tunnel. I don't know whether the chemotherapy has worked. A bone marrow biopsy will have to be done in a couple of weeks to find out whether the hairy cells are still in my bone marrow. But for now, the light at the end of this particular tunnel is there, and tomorrow I get to go home and leave this room, which I'm very pleased about, and so hopefully I'll get a decent night's sleep.